In 1920, one of the most admired companies in history owned a power plant. They had the machine shop, they had a foundry, they had a rubber plantation in Brazil, they had coal mines in Kentucky, they had acres of timberland and iron ore mines in Michigan and Minnesota. They had a fleet of ships, they had an entire railroad. Ford was bringing together every raw material in the process of manufacturing an automobile. Today, 99% of the parts that go into a Ford car are actually outsourced. Even the engine block is made by somebody else. That's the core competency of a car manufacturer. So what's changed? Why is it that today the right way to build a car is by pulling together all those pieces? And 100 years ago, you had to own the entire thing. You would think that, just like Ford, you can basically control the entire pipeline of innovation from beginning to end, guarantee its quality and so on. The problem is that the people who are setting the bar aren't following that rule book. Companies that are leading the market are innovating in such a pace that there's no way that either they or you will be able to do it internally. Imagine that we went back and we said the World Wide Web was a company, and this company was building out web pages, and it would be able to give you great new web pages. And how fast would that have spread? The World Wide Web company. It would have gone nowhere. It would have been yet another offering from yet another company. Instead, the web put out an architecture that was self-serve. Everybody could not only read the content that other people created, but in fact create their own content, and it spread like wildfire. The next iteration of the web is all about APIs and capabilities. And again, it's being built with the same principles of everybody can produce APIs and everybody can consume APIs. There's an API economy out there that offers tens of thousands of open APIs that you can build on top of and incorporate that into what you're doing. And in fact, if you participate in that ecosystem of APIs and take your capabilities, productize them as APIs, and make it available for others, you'll see that innovation being done by other people on your behalf. And that is what's leading to this next rapid cycle of innovation, because it's a distributed system. It's one where a lot of people participate, and it's based upon an ecosystem. So the question I would leave you with is, how will you build an ecosystem to change the clock speed of your industry?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. I am really excited to be here with you this afternoon, our admins, architects, developers, to be looking at how APIs and integrations are really accelerating your innovation. Now, we know that there are more and more systems out there that you're having to connect to. The thing is, if you're looking at integration as a way to simply move data, you're really not getting the full value out of those integrations and out of those APIs. We believe that there's a different way. It's called API-led connectivity, where each of those integrations is actually productized, where each of those APIs is productized. And if you're able to build in this way, you'll start to accelerate your development. So my ask is, as we go through this conversation this afternoon, that you think about all the chances that you have in your organizations to use API-led connectivity to really accelerate your innovation. You can join the trailblazers that we have who have already started to see multi-fold increases in their development speeds. Now, we are going to be looking at some forward-looking topics. So based on that, I encourage you to think about your purchasing and your investment decisions based on commercially available products. Let me start with a thank you. So thank you to our customers, thank you to our partners, and thank you to all of you who are looking at leveraging API-led connectivity for the very first time here today. I also want to do a quick shout out. I want to thank Dharmesh Datta from Airbnb. I want to thank Miguel Martinez from Mastech. And I want to thank Sayesh Prakash from NVIDIA. Dharmesh, Miguel, and Sayesh are here in this conference, and they've also spoken today. So thank you very much for being integration trailblazers. Now let's take a look at the environment that we live in today. When we start thinking about all the things that are connected, this can range all the way from our consumer experiences, where my in-store buying, my online shopping, my shopping preferences, my payment preferences, my physical location is all connected at all times. And it's completely changing my consumer experience. The amazing thing is, all of this started a little over 10 years ago. If you think about it, that was when the smartphones were introduced. And think about how dramatically our lives have shifted in that short time frame. Let's go all the way to the other end of the spectrum. We start looking at how manufacturing is changing. We talked about it before with Ford, where their entire ecosystem and how they connect with their suppliers has shifted. In fact, it goes from there to how they're connected to the shop floor with robotics, and how that is then connected with the sensors that are in the engines, whether that's on the ground or in the air. And that actually goes all the way to 3D printing, which can actually take manufacturing now to the point of purchase. Again, massive shifts in how things are done based on those connected systems. And for all of us as developers, it's an exciting time because we get to leverage all of those capabilities. We get to create all those capabilities. So it's an amazing time to be a developer. But here's the rub. When we take a look at the average e-commerce system that's out there, a single transaction typically crosses over 35 different systems. When you look at the average enterprise, there are over 900 applications deployed on average per enterprise. That explosion of applications means that even after decades of trying to bring it all together, of creating integrations and working on this, less than a third of all those systems are currently integrated. That is both a pain as well as an opportunity for all of us as developers. So the question becomes, how can you leverage this? How can you think about this? So let's take a look at and dig into this a little bit further. If we roll back about 20 years, organizations typically looked at their competitive advantage as deploying large on-premise package applications and customizing them. And they competed based on customizing those applications more and more and having them go wall-to-wall inside their organizations. In those days, integrations were what happened at the edges of those monolithic package applications. But now we're in a place where we have all of these SaaS solutions that are being made available, and SaaS platforms, like the customer success platform, where you not only get application capabilities, but you also get an application development platform. There are also all these cloud infrastructure providers. And there's a need to connect all of those to the devices, the wearables, the sensors, and everything else that's in all those systems that are out there. So this is an opportunity for us as developers to start to leverage all these capabilities. Here's the thing, it's not just about the technology, it's also about the organizational landscape. If you think about what's happening, we've got central IT typically managing those large-scale on-premise deployed applications. You might have a line of business IT that's working on the SaaS applications. You might have an R&D team that's focusing on ML and AI, trying to start up something on the side. You might have core development that's working on microservices now, right? And there's all these capabilities that are available. The issue is that each of these teams is building really independently. They're looking at driving acceleration team by team. You hear a lot about the two-pizza team, right? The optimal collaboration environment being a team that can be fed with two pizzas, right? You want to be co-located, you want to have autonomy, you want to allow each of those teams to drive independently forward. The thing is, once they're done building, all of this has to come back together again to form the actual final product and the final solution that we give to our customers. So what typically happens? Every single one of those teams that's looking for agility and speed starts to build out, and then they start to make the connections to those other systems where they're trying to get data. And every single one of those teams builds connections with every single other team they need to connect to. This is the n-squared problem. And instead of accelerating, things start to slow down. Things become more complex over time. All those integrations are also typically done with custom code that are then distributed across all the different repos out there for all these different projects. So you get less visibility. And over time, this entire system becomes more and more fragile. And the promise of that two-pizza team starts to die. So the question becomes, how can you get agility and quality? How can you get speed and stability? How can you leverage autonomy of individual teams while still being able to bring all this back together again to have coherence across the entire product suite? We think there's a way to do this, and I'm going to do it by example. This is API-led connectivity by example. So if we look at the bottom right-hand corner of this graph, we have all of these different systems. What we want to do here is create an enriched invoicing solution. What I've got is my invoicing system of record. I may have payment information that's coming from a cloud provider or from an on-premise solution. And I have a file-based set of records for all the attachments for those invoices. Again, could be in the cloud, could be on-premise. From there, I've got a ticketing system, and I want all this to be made available on a device. So how am I going to go and build this? Well, let's first go look at that invoicing system of record. When we crack that thing open, what we see is that it's actually really hard to find the information. Right? It's kind of like going into a big warehouse store. Right? You know what you want is somewhere in there, but it's really, really hard to find. Right? There's a different way to do this. So first, we'll start by building and designing an API. This is an easy invoice API. Right? This is defining the invoice as the organization wants to understand it, with just the right fields made available. Now this is like going into the Apple Store. Everything is curated, it's all nicely laid out, you know exactly where things are. And you have all the documentation available to understand how to leverage every single one of those fields. Now, the only thing we've done to this point is designed the API. We've created the specification. We haven't implemented anything. And already we can leverage that, we can mock it, and we can start to give that specification out to other teams to understand if it's really going to solve all the problems that people want to solve with this API. Next, I need to implement this API. So what I'm going to do is create a composite application. This is going to create a connection to that backend system. It's going to pull out the data, it'll transform it, and it'll expose it as that easy invoice API. And the key here is that API is a product. That integration is a product, and that API is a product. Meaning, there's a roadmap for it, there's a strategy, there's a vision, and there's a known set of customers who will be leveraging that API. And as you start to publish these, you enable those customers to use that API. Now the next step is we want to add the payment information as well as those attachments. And again, I'm going to mock out the enriched invoicing API. Again, I'll create another composite application calling that previous API I had created. And there you have it. I have my enriched invoicing API. I'll do that one more time, and I've completed this project. I've got all these capabilities that are now available. My wearable can actually get that enriched invoice. Right? The key is that what I've left behind are 3 APIs that are published, that are well understood, and can be reused for the next project. So now I want to go build my next application. For this, team now wants to understand how when there's an IoT device on a piece of equipment, as you're manufacturing, we want every time that piece of equipment to be, when it's used, to actually trigger the creation of a ticket and an invoice. So again, what I'll do here is I'll create a composite application, and I'll extend that original integration. And just like that, I'm now done with my next project. And this is what happens as you build with API-led connectivity, you start to get more and more of these nodes created. And every single one of those composite applications is a Mule application, it's a Mule flow, defined through metadata, and it's all running on the Mule runtime engine. And all of those capabilities are then published into Anypoint Exchange. This is the catalog of all the assets and capabilities inside the organization. You can see I've already got my rich invoices, I've got my invoices, I've got customers. And as I do this project by project, I start to build out all the other capabilities in my enterprise. And what starts to happen is the pace starts to increase because I've got these capabilities made available. Each future project can leverage them. And in fact, a lot of that debt that's out there starts to be retired. So all of that opaque custom code starts to be removed as you start to integrate different systems. So rather than legacy systems being seen as something that slows you down, every single one of those legacy systems becomes an asset that you can use, that you can leverage, that is unique to your organization, that can accelerate all of your future projects. That is what an application network is. That is your application network. It is your systems your data, your devices, that come together, become made visible through this process. This comes about a project at a time, so it doesn't have to be big bang. And as you do this, you start to get documented APIs and documented systems. So you get more and more visibility over time. You start to understand what systems are calling what other systems. You start to understand how they're being used. And this gives you acceleration as you develop, because now you can know who you're impacting and how you're going to build going forward. And that's how we think about the ability to recompose over time. You can plug and unplug assets into that application network. Now, that application network is also part of the customer success platform. Within the customer success platform, we have all these great capabilities around sales, service, marketing, engagement, the creation of applications on the platform, analytics, collaboration, communities. We also know that there's all that data and all those processes that are available outside of the customer success platform that you really want to be able to leverage. And that's where we can plug in now your application network into the customer success platform, really giving you the advantage of all the assets you already have, plugging in to your customer experience platform. Now, all this is made possible by the Anypoint platform. This is a quick view of the platform. What we have at the core is the Mule Runtime engine. This is the core transaction processing and API management engine. The Mule Runtime engine takes care of connectivity, transformation, orchestration, and mediation of data. It can be run in our multi-tenanted cloud. It can also be run on-premise. Around the outside, we have all the services that help you build those applications in Design Center and to mock and create those APIs. We have Exchange, which is, again, that catalog of assets that you can start to publish into. Management Center allows you to run and operate and view and monitor all the aspects of that application network. And finally, we have security that overlays all of this, enabling new ways of thinking about understanding how data is actually transiting that entire application network and giving you more visibility into items like PII or PCI and sensitive data and where that's actually flowing. So now what I'd like to do is turn to one of our customers. This is Phil from Asics. Many of you saw him yesterday. The Asics team has really done amazing things with the Anypoint platform, and I'd like to roll the video to show you what it looks like when they built with API-led connectivity.
Asics was established in 1949. Over those years, the company has had to make quite a few different transitions. In the past, it was all about designing the latest model of shoes. Although that continues to be very important for the company, IT has become more and more important. That's one of the reasons that we acquired a company like Runkeeper, so we can provide those digital services to the runner, track their runs, and provide more than just the shoe. We need to constantly be on their mind when they're going out for that run and lacing up their shoes. For a company like Asics, it really does mean that IT has to come to the forefront. So building out an e-commerce platform is important to us because we need to be able to connect with customers in many different ways. We have quite a few different brands. We have Asics Performance, we have Asics Tiger and Onitsuka Tiger. We also have Hagloft, and we have Runkeeper. In order to build a new e-commerce site, we needed to tie in to all of the back-end systems that each one of those brands had already had configured. So MuleSoft has helped us out by being that communication point between the product systems, order management systems, content management systems, and that e-commerce storefront. We were able to build out this new e-commerce platform in under 6 months by using MuleSoft. MuleSoft has been great for our ability to reuse code. One of the ways that we were able to leverage MuleSoft for reuse was with our order management API. So we wanted to connect to the Asics OMS system. And then as we moved into one of the other Asics subsidiaries called Haglofts, they had a different OMS that we needed to connect with. So we were able to use the same API that we had set up in MuleSoft to connect to the Hagloft OMS. We're moving 2.5 times faster than we would have expected to if we had built it out of Java. What developers like the most about using MuleSoft is it allows us to spend all of our time in the application-specific logic and not have to worry about making those connections to the various data sources. MuleSoft is helping to drive our e-commerce strategy, then that's going to allow us to move a lot faster as a company.
All right. I love that video. I love Runkeeper. It's a great app. So what was Asics able to do, right? As they started to build out with API-led connectivity, they started building out their APIs, they created these assets, and they published them in project number 1. They took their PIM, their product information database, and they made that available. They created their product API and their inventory API, all for the core Asics brand. Then you heard Phil talk about the fact that they looked at their order management system as their next project. Now, what's interesting is in project number 2, all those original APIs are available, so they only had to create that order management API. Then as we went to project number 3, they started looking at brand expansion. And they were able to leverage those interfaces to connect to the same systems in their extended brands and create a channels API for folks like Tiger Onitsuka, right? These are the other brands that Asics has out there. Now, let's take a look at what this actually got them. It got them to developing these projects from quarters down to months. And if you take a look, one click deeper, it's a technical audience, so this is what they actually end up getting, right? Across the bottom, they got all these system APIs. These are the composite applications and the APIs that define the core domain objects for Asics. Over on the left, you see that product information database. In the middle, you see the OMS systems, right? So they're able to mediate those different OMS systems with a single order API, right? And at the next layer, you have the process APIs. So this starts to define extensions on those core domain objects. How do you actually submit an order? How do you actually get product information? How do you look at order status, right? And these are not just read APIs. So this is not just about getting data. This is about creating new orders. This is also about process execution, right? And then finally, across the top, you have your experience APIs. So this is where you take all those capabilities and you start to package them for the specific experience that the customer might have on the other side, whether that's a web application, a point of sale system, a mobile device, or even, in the middle there, the external channels API. Right? So the consumer of these APIs, the experience, could be a digital experience with another system. Right? And all these are made available now for all the future projects. So this is Asics API-led connectivity. This is their application network. This is what they ended up building. And they continue to build this out project after project. So now what I'd like to do is spend a little bit of time looking at what API-led connectivity looks like leveraging the Anypoint platform. For this, I'm going to introduce Badi Azad, Director of Product Management here at MuleSoft. Bring him up. All right. Hey, thanks, Badi. Nice shoes.
Thank you. Thank you. I noticed you had the Tigers on. All right, great. I'm really excited to be here. But before we get started, I wanted to give a shout out to Ashley and Peru, who are going to be running the demo for us. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. Now, we have a lot to cover, and I'm really excited to show you this demo. But before we do, why don't I tee it up here? So we're going to look at the power of the Anypoint platform. And we're going to go in and visually design an API. Then we're going to create an integration that uses that API. And last, we're going to test that API and that integration using mocked data. Sound good? All right. Let's get started. Okay, so for the purposes of this demo, let's assume that we're working for Northern Trail Outfitters. They're a company that competes with the likes of REI or North Face, right? So they're a retailer, and they sell different types of outdoor stuff. And customers use their Lightning-based mobile app to place their orders. However, there's a problem with that experience. See, the fact is that the customer don't get their receipt and their shipping information for up to an hour. Now, the reason for that is that the order system, the entry system, and the management system are sitting on an hourly batch job. And so it takes some time for that order to be processed. All right, so why don't we see how, through the power of the Anypoint platform, we can do two things. First, let's take that sync job, and let's see if we can move it to a real-time let's take the batch job and move it to a real-time sync so that we can actually send out a text message to confirm the order for the customers. And then second, let's see if we can use the power of Einstein to make a recommendation for that customer at that point of sale for some of the products that match their order. Sounds good? All right, Ashley, can we log into the Anypoint platform? Okay. So here's the Anypoint platform homepage. At the top, we see the Design Center. This is where you go to design your API specifications and to create your integrations. On the right, we have Management Center. This is where you go to manage those APIs and those integrations. You can monitor and secure them as well. And on the bottom is the Exchange. Think about Exchange as your integration app store. Let's take a closer look at that Exchange for us, Ashley. Okay, here's the Exchange. It comes out of the box with reusable templates and connectors and assets that we can use. Now, why don't we look into the Exchange to see if there's an order API that's being used by the mobile app that we can leverage? Perfect. Let's drill down here and see if we can understand this API a little bit further. It's fully documented, and on the left-hand side, we see some of the endpoints that are available to us. Here we see the get method, as well as the get method by ID. This allows us to get order information or get a specific order information by the ID of that order. But you know what? What's missing here is the post. We need to be able to go in and post and create a new order. So why don't we load this API up and see if we can extend it to do that? Now, Ashley's opening up this API in API Designer. This is our declarative web-based API spec design tool. What you see on the left is a UI that you can actually manipulate and build out that specification. As you're doing that, on the right, you'll actually see the code, the underlying code for that API being generated for us. Now, on the far left, what I see is the order endpoint, as well as the order by ID endpoint. But above it, I also see the reusable data sources, the data types that are there, the order data type and the billing info data type. Now, Ashley, let's check out that order info and see if we can make that post method we talked about. Great. So let's click on post, add a new response, and there we can change the body, the response status, from 200 to 201. That signifies that an order has been created. Now, for the body of the response there, what Ashley can do is create a string that responds back that the order has been created. This is what you get when you call that endpoint. Next, we need to think about the body of that order. What information do you need to supply for that order to be created? Now, it's going to be easier than you think because we already have an order data type that's reusable. So let's just select that and put it into the type section. With just that, we have been able to define a post order without actually adding any specific code. Now, as she was designing that API, what you might have noticed on the right-hand side was that the underlying RAML and OAS was being automatically generated for her. So you can choose to interact either in code or using the UI there. Now, the next thing I wanted to show you is a really powerful feature. The Anypoint platform supplies what we call a mocking service. That mocking service allows you to then test your API endpoints with sample data. Now that she's turned it on, a URL is inserted, and we can actually go in and test our post order. So why don't we try out sending the information necessary for that endpoint and making sure that we get the right message back. Okay, that looks perfect. And with that, there's one last step. Let's just take this updated API specification that we've created and let's publish it back into the Exchange so that all of our colleagues and developers can now take advantage of this API that we've extended. Let's go back and take a look at it in Exchange. Here, under the endpoints, we see that the order endpoints are available to us, the get that we had before, and the post. And automatically, documentation and example code has been generated for us. Now, the next step is important. Ashley, why don't we share this with our central IT team so that they can start on the implementation process? Let me pause for a second. This is really important. Before, Ashley and I would have to wait until that API was implemented before we could proceed. But now, because of that mocking service that was enabled earlier, we can actually simultaneously build out our integration while that API is implemented. And once the API is done being implemented, the mock data will switch to live data. All right, I think we're done here. Let's go back to that Anypoint homepage, please. Okay, so let's recap. What did we accomplish? We took an existing API and we extended it. We added the ability to post a new order. Then, using the mocking service, we were able to test it and confirm the interaction with that endpoint. And last, we were able to share it with our central IT team so that they can go off and develop it and implement it. Now, the next step for us is that we wanted to go in and take an order from Salesforce, and we wanted to send that order off to that new order API that we've created. Then we wanted to take any recommendations from the Einstein API and enhance what we give back to the customer via a text message. So why don't we use two services for that? We can use the Twilio API to send the SMS, and we'll use that Einstein API. All right, let's go back into Exchange, and let's see if there's something that can help us start faster. Now, here in Exchange, new are going to be templates that have been optimized for integration creation. And Ashley is going to search for something that might be able to help us out. Okay, I think she's found something. Here, what we see is a template that takes an object that's created in Salesforce and sends that information to Twilio. This looks perfect to get us started faster. So let's go ahead and load this template up with one click. Here, we're launching the new Flow Designer application. This is our web-based design environment for creating integrations with low code. What you see on the canvas here are a series of cards. Think about these cards as the steps in your integration flow. Each card has a different activity. Maybe it's a trigger that's listening for a change in a different system. Maybe it's a card that's transforming data, or maybe it's another card that's sending information elsewhere. So all you have to do is set the series of cards and configure them based off of what your objective it is, right? So actually, let's use this template, and let's customize it a little bit. The next thing that you're going to see here, which is new with templates, are a notes field that come out of the box with MuleSoft inside of each single connector. These notes help us understand how we can actually interact and use that card better. So in this example, the Salesforce connector, it helps us understand how we configure it by entering our username and our password. And now we can go ahead and test our connection. Now, behind the scenes, something really interesting is happening. Flow Designer is going into that Salesforce environment and inspecting all of the objects that she has access to. This includes custom objects. She can use any of those objects to start her flow, which is really powerful. So now that she's selected that custom order object, let's go ahead and close this card, and let's start configuring our Twilio connector. Twilio is similar. It just requires the ability for us to enter in our username and our password. So let's go ahead and enter that information in now. Great. We also need to add in our account ID. Okay, so here we have configured our template. It got us started a lot faster. There's a lot of information already there for us. But Ashley, let's see if we can add a card in between Salesforce and Twilio, please. Let's see if we can customize this template. Here, what you notice is that the exchange is integrated right into Flow Designer. From here, we can find all of those connectors and all of those APIs for our community. She's found that same order API that we just were interacting with. In fact, we see that create order endpoint that we just created available to us. Let's go ahead and select that and close out that card. Perfect. Okay, now here's what we need to do next. We've got to take the data from Salesforce and manipulate it somehow to make it fit into what we need for that order API. Let's see what we can find there. Flow Designer offers a transform card. Now, this transform card is really powerful. Let me explain what it does. On the left-hand side is it's inspecting that Salesforce object, and it's looking through the metadata, and it's creating a multi-dimensional tree for us with all the information available to us. It does the same thing on the right-hand side for the output. So all we need to do now is click and drag the fields that we're interested in from the left to the right. Not bad. But why do it manually? Up there, I see a preview button. Let's go ahead and try that out. The preview button shows us that there's a machine learning algorithm underneath Flow Designer that's running that's able to recommend to us transformations for these objects. Here you can choose to preview, accept, and modify those recommendations, and every time she interacts with it, it teaches the recommendation engine for the future. This is pretty powerful. Let's go ahead and close this card. Okay, so we've got a flow that listens for a change on a Salesforce object, transforms it, sends the information to our order data, and now let's find that Einstein API that we talked about earlier. Ashley, could we look for it there between those two? Perfect. The Einstein API has a get recommendations that takes the information that's the output of that order API that we created earlier. Let's go ahead and give this, let's go ahead and close this. Now, we have that flow that we were talking about. We take that information, transform it, place an order, grab a recommendation from Einstein, and now we can send it out to Twilio to send our customers an instantaneous text message. Let's run this application and give it a shot. Okay, we're back in our app. Let's start the shopping process, and let's get that jacket again. Okay, let's check out here. Okay, looks like it's been purchased. Now, let's go to Salesforce and make sure that that order was actually added to our system. There it is. Okay, I see it. Great. Hey, we got a text message. Let's take a look at that. Okay, this is pretty interesting. The top half of that text message is the same mocked data that we saw earlier. The bottom half is that Einstein recommendation, which is live. Now, when our team is done with the implementation, that data will switch from mock data to real data. But the power here is that we were able to simultaneously work, right? Really accelerating our ability to innovate. Let's go ahead and click on that recommendation. Okay, it looks like it recommended a matching pair of gloves for that jacket. This is awesome. Ashley, thank you so much. In just a few minutes, we were able to create and extend an API. We shared it with our colleagues. We tested it using the mocking service. Then we made an integration which pulled data out of Salesforce, even custom objects, used machine learning to transform it into that new API, place our order. Then we were able to pull that information and send it to Einstein, which recommended another product and sent a text message, all through the power of the Anypoint platform. Great. Thank you so much. Mark, back to you.
Great job. Great demo, Body. So what we saw there was the ability to create those productized APIs, those productized integrations, and now what's been left behind for NTO are a whole set of APIs are now available for future projects. Now what's interesting is in addition to the developer and the technical documentation that's created, we know that there's also a need, oftentimes, to start thinking about the building of communities. And we think about communities, we start thinking about the fact that with all of these digital experiences, APIs become the new channel for business. Now let's take a look at this. If we take a look at that bottom plane, that's your application network. There's all the APIs and everything you've already got built out, right? Now imagine that there's a set of APIs that you actually want to start iterating on with a different team in your organization. You want to gather feedback, you want to understand how they're using it, you want to give them the ability to chat and run a forum on how those APIs are doing for them. You can lift those out and you can create an API program. Here's another use for an API program. You might want to run a hackathon, again, on a specific set of APIs that you have in your organization. We found that hackathons are an amazing way to actually start driving creativity and actually gathering that from across the organization. So that's another kind of API program. Now, you might also have API programs that you want to run with external partners, the creation of ecosystems. In this case, you would also need, beyond the developers inside your organization, you might start thinking about how you, as developers, can work with your business development teams, your partnership teams, your developer relations groups, your marketers, to bring all those teams together to create an API program, to create an ecosystem externally. So today, I'm really happy to announce that as a part of our May 2019 release, we are launching API Community Manager. This is bringing out the power of a full lifecycle API management platform with a complete developer experience platform on top of it. enabling you to drive the kind of engagement that you're driving today with your customers, but rather drive that engagement with your developers through forums, chats, and ticketing systems. It will also have all the personalization capabilities so you can actually drive those programs to specific groups of developers. And finally, API Community Manager is actually built on top of Salesforce Community Cloud. This is great because what we're able to leverage is all that knowledge that's coming from over 300 million customers that have been using Community Cloud to engage with their providers, and taking all that knowledge and turning it to a developer experience platform. We're now able to engage directly with developers. Now, what I'd like to do next is show a demo of API Community Manager. For this, I'm going to bring up Sanjana Verma, a great product manager that we have here at MuleSoft. Sanjana?
Thanks, Mark. Nice kicks. So now, let's look at this in the context of Northern Trail Outfitters again. As we saw in the previous demo, builders of these APIs publish and share them across their organizations using Anypoint Exchange. And this is extremely powerful. But the next thing that they have to do is entice developers like you, whether you're at partner sites, whether you're at customer sites, or simply fans of NTO's technology, to use the APIs they have as you're building out your applications. And you have to think about that adoption as APIs for products and for developers. And that means delivering a great customer experience. Now, typically, this has meant delivering an awesome development experience for developers. And that means, unfortunately, a lot of manual code. It means publishing API documentation, linking it to forums, putting it with support ticketing systems. It means coordinating your design teams and your marketing teams in order to make sure that branding and content is on point with your organization. It means engaging with analytics. And all in all, it takes a lot of teams and a lot of times to get that going. But with API Community Manager, you don't have to do that anymore. So what we're seeing over here is NTO's API community system. And it looks almost exactly like the e-commerce site we saw before, but it's not. It's customized for their audience. They know that their audience of developers wants to connect with them and their organization. So if we actually scroll down, we can see that they've chosen to show corporate news alerts and details about their information and local events and meetups. This allows their developer audience to engage with them personally and keep in touch with what the company is doing. And on top of it, they can also see more information about the APIs. So if we click into it, we can see both the business value justifications of those APIs as well as technical documentation. Now, this is pretty important because for you as developers, you can use these points to help justify a new project that you're building. It also means that your partners and business development teams that you work with can understand the technology that you're trying to use and how they can use that and extend into NTO's ecosystem. If we actually navigate into the technical documentation, we can see that we get both documentation, we can get the live mocking service, we get examples. This is the exact same functionality that we saw with Anypoint Exchange earlier before, and it's all being sourced and powered from Anypoint platform. This is incredibly powerful to have a unified, consistent experience, whether you're an internal developer at NTO or you're an external developer like yourselves. You have the opportunity to have one single central source of truth as you're developing your APIs. Now, this also means that NTO can access and manage user credentials. They can also monitor to see how you as a developer are using their APIs. And they have this all in one unified ecosystem, one interface to manage it all. Now, what happens to you as a developer? It's also that API Community Manager is built on top of Community Cloud, which means, like Mark said, you have access to hundreds and millions of your developer peers who are potentially using NTO's APIs as they're building out their projects. So you can learn from them. If we go ahead and navigate into the forums, We can see that you can participate in the forums. You can ask a question. You can raise a contact or even contact support. But we've been able to unify forums with documentation, with support in one place for you to access information from your peers. And that's powerful. It takes a community to raise an API and really take advantage of all that the technology has to offer. And on the backside, NTO can use that information both from a qualitative perspective as well as quantitative perspective. We can see that they have all of the KPIs and dashboards already built out to ensure that they can manage the content, manage how the developers are using that information, and see what they need to do at the next rev to improve the API development experience for you. And this is completely powerful. At the end of the day, API Community Manager allows the developers and the API creators to connect in a way that's never been possible before. They can publish relevant content much more quickly. They can ensure that the information is up to date because they have custom visibility into seeing who's using their information, who's using their APIs, how is it being used, and what do they need to do to improve your experience. For you as a developer, you get to connect with the technology, connect with the company, connect with each other in a way to make your API development experience much more productive. All in all, API Community Manager is giving us the opportunity to create the connected developer experience, only powered by the Anypoint platform. Back to you, Mark.
Great job. Thanks so much, Sanja. All right, so the great thing about API Community Manager, it is built on top of Community Cloud. So what this means is all the skills that you have built and all the leverage that you have with the Lightning platform, all those components are also available. And all the additional components that have been built for Community Cloud and customer communities can now be leveraged for your developer communities. So what we've seen here today is the need for these connected customer experiences, the difficulty in building them, but how you can accelerate that by creating productized APIs and productized integrations, and how those productized APIs and integrations then become not just a way to connect and pull data out, but as a way to actually accelerate innovation over time across your entire product suite. And finally, all this is built on top of Salesforce Trusted Platform. What this means is that from day one, you have all the connectivity, templates, and examples that are targeted towards the Salesforce clouds that you're leveraging inside of the Anypoint platform. So I'm just going to leave you with the question that we started with, which is as you start thinking about integrations, you start thinking about data, how can you leverage productized APIs to really develop an ecosystem and change the clock speed of your business and your industry? Here are all the additional resources that you have to learn more about Anypoint Platform and about this process of building out your application networks. Thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us and learning more and talking more about these topics. Thank you very much.